Hello, people. Welcome to another video. I had to start it on a funny way. So I done a mustache, as some of you might have seen already on Instagram. This came out as a joke with my missus and me. She hates mustaches, and she's like, "Oh, please don't leave a mustache on." So I decided just to leave it, just to annoy her. It's what you do to upset women. Now, today's subject is quite interesting because, again, surrounds air, surrounds like the amount, like not the amount of air you need to make power, but the way things behave with air. And today is related. We're going to speak a bit about ITBs, intake manifolds, and a little bit of the science behind it, and in terms of sizing, what's ideal and how to calculate all of it, which is something that I do thoroughly to the manifolds I do. So I decided just to put together, like on my board, all the maths required to calculate the port speed or the on the cross radius section, so then you can understand the impact it has when you go up a size, when you put something that is too big, and it comes down like the ultimate price you're going to pay by oversizing or undersizing. So oversizing is never going to be a restriction in CFM. It's going to be a problem in speed, and you want airspeed to make the torque. And if the size is too small, the airspeed is going to be extremely high, but then you might not have enough CFM for the target you have. So it's all about having the right balance between both. Okay, so it's not, I'm not here telling you, oh, for a 2-liter engine, you need to use this size. For a 1.9, I need this size. No, the size, it's to do with the valves you have on the engine and the port dimensions as well. And in here today on the board, I've written like the equation to calculate port speed, or the calculated port speed for a determinate port area. And then I also have just below it, for the same engine, like the internal diameter. Let's say like when you have ITBs, you got 40s, 42s, 45s, you know, and it goes on. And then you start seeing like it will show like how much impact it will have on the speed. And remember, when you have less port speed, your torque is going to be harder to get up. Like your transient throttle is going to be different. The engine is not going to be as crisp on response. This is all the downsides you have to live with. So as I said again, it's all balancing the port speed with the CFM. So now in here behind me, we have my board, as you guys met last video, and what I have on the board today. So yes, I'm covering half of it. We have in here cross-sectional area port speed, which is the conversation today. So what do we need to calculate the port speed? So we need to know like what's the cross-sectional area. Okay, so it's the cross-section area of the port or the tube or whatever you want to. Then we need to know the piston speed. So as I mentioned on the last video, piston speed, it will let you know roughly how much air you're moving, or of course it's to do all with the CFM the head is going to have, but you need to know the piston speed you have at that RPM, and then it goes from there. So we need to calculate the piston speed in feet per minute. This is all like it's going to be feet per minute and inches. I can convert it to like mil and stuff, but it's just, this is for you guys to understand the numbers a bit better. So the way it works is piston speed, you have the stroke in feet times 2. So piston goes up and down per rotation. It goes up and down twice, so up and down. So you have to multiply the stroke times 2, and then you multiply that times the RPM. So a 72 mil stroke engine. This is an engine that I had everything written down. This is for our N44 B16, our 1.6 engine that we built for a rally car. And so we got the stroke is 0.24 feet. We'll time it by 2, then we'll multiply it by the RPM, and we got 3,840 feet per minute. That's the piston speed at 8,000 RPM. Okay, so now we know that. And why am I looking at it at 8,000 RPM? Because that was where I would like to see the engine still making decent torque and making the peak power. So then we now can start calculating the port speed. So to calculate the port speed, we need piston speed, which is PS in here. We divide by 60 because piston speed is in minutes and we need it in seconds because the port speed is measured in feet per second. So we have to divide this by 60. Then we have to multiply it by the bore in inches square divided by the port cross-sectional area, which is PA is port cross-section area. Now, in this engine, the way it works, we have, so our piston speed 3840 is here, divide by 60, then we have to multiply that by the bore in inches, which is 3.307. Then I measured the cross-sectional area of the standard head, and it was 1.86 inches square. Okay, so what we have to do is then this equals 64. So the piston speed is 64 feet per second. Then we multiply it by, this is now the square of the 3.307, which is 10.94. And then we have to divide the 10.94 by 186. Then we end up with 64 times 5.88. And this equals 376 feet per second at a pressure test of 28 inches. Now, what I've done in here is, so I want to explain to you like the effect it will have if you put a pipe that is too big, a pipe that is right size, and what effect it will have. Now, let's have, this is just an example, okay? So it's not like it's going to be like this. This is an example, but it's a very good base, guys. You know, this like development and engines, it's a very exact science. Okay, so it's if things are done right, things will always work. Now, I'm going to put in here. So we have, let's just have as an example. You think, for that 1.6, I want to go with 42 mil ITB. Let's put ITB because it's easy. Everyone understands. Everyone knows it's free flowing, and then we already have this the port cross section area, which we know. So something to work well, it had to be the same like cross sectional area. And people say, 42 mil or 45 mil. Right, it's not quite the ideal size for this. So we get at 1.86, we know we got 376 feet per second. If we go 42 mil, which people think it's quite small, so it should fit a 1.6 nicely. It's not that simple. So a 42 mil internal diameter, so 42 mil ITB, for example, it's only 7.6% bigger onto ideal diameter of what port I ideally want to maintain that port speed. How much are you going to pay for choosing this size? So in here at 42 mil ITB, our port speed at 8,000 RPM drops to 327 feet per second. Now, this is a 15% loss on port speed. And now let me just get my phone. I need to do some math in here. So I can tell you like how much higher you will have to rev this engine to make the same power you make at 8,000 to make the same with a bigger throttle body. So we got in here. So we know that at 8,000 we got 376. Okay, but then at 8,000 we will have 327 with that size. So we just have to work this out. Sorry guys, I'm quiet because I am calculating this. I don't want it to do it wrong. I want to exemplify to you the best way possible what will happen. So, simple. To make the same port speed with the wrong size ITB or runner, you would need to rev the engine to 9,198, so 92. So if you look at it right way, it only means like to make the same power, you would have to rev the engine an extra 1100 RPM, which is a lot. It's quite a big difference. So all that thing left back, the torque you didn't make there, then it will only make it at a much later RPM. So this equates to a big loss. And now this is where the problem starts, is when people oversize things, this tends to happen, you know. And why I'm saying ATVs at the moment is because it's the easier setup to do. You know, when you're testing stuff, making a manifold, there's a lot of areas, you have a lot of ground you have to cover. And on the ITB, you only cover 2 grounds, but it's easy to change. So you have the diameter and length. I will explain to you what effect that will have. But for now, I'm going to carry on with this one. Now, we said, okay, so that's too big. I'll go 40. 40, you look at it, it's a very small difference. It's only, what? It's only 2 mil. 2 mil is 1 mil on the radius. So it's very little. And then it's only 2.6 more than what the head has. And we got then the speed of it goes to 362. It will work really well because it's extremely close to the 376, and the port area is really, the cross-sectional area is extremely close to the 186 of the head. Ideally, you want to keep everything on the same cross-sectional area, so it works better. It has you know, it's smoother for the air. Everything, it works better. You know, there's no openings, reducing or anything. Air doesn't like bends, doesn't like it likes to go straight. That's it. Air is very lazy. So then in here, you see, we got it's only 2.6% bigger in ID, but still has a 4% reduction on the port speed. But the thing is, 4% is not a lot. So let's say you will have to rev the car another 300 RPM to make up for the extra space. Now the thing is, this is where, like when I mentioned earlier on the video, this is important for you to know how much something flows. Okay, because if you have a power target that is higher than what the 40 mil can do in terms of CFM, you definitely need to go 42, but it only means like your power is going to be quite at the top, but then it will make the power you want. So this is why it's important for you to see how much CFM can the 42 mil do. I will do a video on that, so then you guys can connect the videos one with the other. So if you see, like I'm trying to do this on the way, so you guys can see from the previous video what you've learned in terms of valve events, and now we're understanding how the air behaves. So you know when the valve opens on the right time during the right amount of time, you will have the right air speed in there to make excellent cylinder fill, which is what gives you the volumetric efficiency. So now on this engine, what would be the ideal size? 39 mil. It goes exactly to the 1.86 mil of cross-sectional area. Now, there's more math to this than just this. This I'm just looking at the port cross-sectional area. Then there's other thing, which is the ideal cross-sectional area per valve size. And that is exactly how you should define the port size, because there's a lot of people, when they port heads, they make the ports huge. They make the ports very big. And ultimately, you have a ratio between the valve size and the port size. You have to calculate like the area of both and of the valve you have, and then the head itself, and you have to have them as close as possible. Of course, it's impossible to make it exactly the same. There's other factors you have to take into consideration. It's not only just 1 + 1 = 2. No, it's more than that, because then you have to make sure the air just goes in the best way possible, like the smoothest route. And then there's also other factors on the port that you guys will be surprised the difference it makes. I'll give you a good example. When I was doing the SR20 cylinder head development, the VE heads, I had the VE and the VET. And from my previous experience, I said to the owner of the head straight away, I know the VET is going to have higher port speed and possibly more CFM, but the CFM not so sure, but port speed is surely going to be better. And the port entry is exactly the same shape. They are very similar inside. They only have one difference. And he looked at me and he laughed and he said, "Why you say that?" I said, "The port divider on the VET is a lot longer than the port divider on the VE, the non VET. So that will help port speed a lot." And when we've done the testing on the heads, it happened exactly as I said. So the VET done they done literally the same CFM, but VET has a much better port speed. So VET head is the better head to work with because it flows the same but has better port speed. So here we go. You have the answer in there. So it's not like it's going to make more power. No, it's just going to have a broader torque band. As simple as that. And also can make more power. One thing you guys have to understand why port speed is so important is because of this thing right at the top in here. It says air 1 gram per second equals 1.32 bhp. This is at atmospheric pressure and a temperature factor of 20 degrees, which is the SAE constant. So it's 20 degrees. This, if everything is working well, this is what you're going to get. Okay. As I said before, it doesn't mean it is exactly like that, but it's not going to be far off because you have to take into account other things like friction on the engine and how much it's the BMEP you have to take into consideration, which is the brake mean. I cannot remember the full term. I know what it is, and I will bring a video up with that as well, so you guys can understand better how things work inside an engine and the best way to see, like, to calculate the power potential of an engine, because then you will have all the maths to see what is what. Other thing, yes, brake mean effective pressure, exactly that. So that's it. That's also very important to use when you're calculating like the power potential of an engine. So if you have all the maths working right, it will be within what you calculated. But of course, the thing is, like, to see all of this, you have to do the same as I do. So cylinder heads I do, as you guys know, they are CFM tested. I know the port speed. I know the CFM. So it's natural that when I put an engine together, I can calculate roughly how much power it's going to make. And the good thing about it is, if it's not making the power I expected it to make, I know something is not right. Or the intake or the exhaust, you know, all it takes is a small bump on the wrong place for the power to be completely gone. Now, I bought another bit of equipment this week to help me developing a bit more of my intake manifolds. And what this equipment does, I'm going to use it on the dyno because it's the only place I can use it really. So when I'm doing when I'm flat out, like what it does, it measures the atmospheric density. And it compares the outside pressure with the pressure inside the plenum of the manifold or the run or whatever I want to put it on. And from that, I can see if it's the engine is at its best efficiency, like if the intake itself is causing any restriction, or if there's other problem. If like what I can see better what the engine is doing, and therefore helps me moving forward. I also bought, which also has arrived, exhaust pressure sensor. So I'm also going to monitor the pressure inside the exhaust, so then I can see if I got excessive pressure on the exhaust system that is not allowing me to make power. But then, of course, I can, if I have the exhaust pressure, the intake density, and the air density, then I can tell you exactly the power potential that engine has on that combination. If I equal all the values, it will tell me exactly how much power that engine will make if there's no restriction on the intake or the exhaust. But the main reason for me to do that is so I understand better if there is a problem in that part, the intake manifold, the exhaust, or the exhaust manifold. So therefore, it helps me improving the product. So to get the most out of it, this is the only way to do it. There's only so much we can do with calculation. Then we can put the things together. And again, if the numbers don't add up, I need to see what it is. But even without it, I want to see also like what actually happens. What's the density difference inside the intake? You know, I'm quite really looking forward to have that equipment, so I can have a better understanding of what my engines are doing, and I understand better. I can make it better. That's the thing. Now, so I hope you guys understood this, and now I'm going to move to the next subject, which is something that I spoke quite a bit about it before, but I thought it's better to explain what port speed is before I move into the next part of the conversation. And this is your favorite one, ITB versus intake manifold. Now, I'm going to tell you like the pros and cons. Just to clarify things, I'm not an ITB hater. I don't hate ITBs. People that think that, they got the complete wrong assumption. I really like ITBs. 7 years ago, no longer than that, no, 8 years ago, I had ITBs on my 318 and I took them off. I hated the car on the ITBs because I did what everyone used to say online to do. That was just put the S50 and B32 or whatever it was, ITBs on it. It works really well, sounds good. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree, it sounds good, but the torque was gone. There was no torque on the car. Like down low, it had nothing. It was flat as a pancake. And you know, then of course now I know exactly why. It had to do with this. It's the wrong size of ITB, and because I still had standard cam, standard head, you know, the engine was pretty much standard. So it's what most of the times people do, which is just buy ITVs and whack them on, and they say, oh, it's great. There's a lot more to it than just bolting down. Anyway, I'm going to start cleaning this board, and I am going to start talking a bit about the ITV thing. It took me quite a while to write. So, whiteboard now, new ideas. So let me just see, there's someone, give me a second guys before I crack on. I just want to see, have you ever had CFD simulation on your, yes, a long time ago, quite a long time ago before I produced, and I had 5 or 6 different intake designs, and I still have changed it recently to newer science that I've learned. Hi Bruno, thank you for the videos, appreciated. Can you please tell us what you think about chips on M42s, 44s, if they are worth it as a bolt-on upgrade for a daily driver? Depends who's doing it. I remapped loads of M44s, chips for the M42. I don't do them. I asked my very good friend Enda at N Tuning, which is someone I really trust. I really rate his mapping. He knows the science behind it. He knows what it should be done and what shouldn't be done. He's not. He doesn't deal with he doesn't do things the wrong way. So he does it the right way. So I use his chips on the M42s that I tune. But yeah, if it's done right, it's worth doing. It's the engine becomes a lot more alive. It's nicer to drive, gives you a little bit more torque. Power-wise, they gain between 8 to 10 bhp. If someone tells you they gain more out of a map, just forget about it. They don't. I tested far too many times, and I'm telling you, they make between 8 to 10 bhp more. They do make 8 to 10 bhp more. My opinion on GT86, I spoke about it before. It's a chassis I really like. I really like that chassis. Even with the stock power, I think it's a fun car. I think the chassis is too good for the engine, though. That engine could have a little bit more power on it. Some of you don't know, but I tuned the GT86 turbo not 6 months ago, wasn't it? How long ago? February. So in February, last Feb, I tuned this GT86 turbo. It was decent. I would love to build a K. Oh yes, who wouldn't? K24 is a great engine. Anyway, let's follow this ITV thing. Again, I'm not a hater of ITVs, and the reason why I entered before in the past, not nowadays, so many arguments on the ITV things. I know I did came across the wrong way many times because I think is the way I express myself is not quite the way it should be done. But my point always has been like, to make more power, you don't necessarily have to go to ITV. There's a science on intake manifold, and the biggest problem there is to make an intake manifold as effective as an ITV, you have to put a lot of time and science into it. It's not as simple as just whack ITVs on it and then just change the trumpet length to get the ideal torque and the power out of the car. On an intake manifold, it has a lot more to it because you have to control exactly the same factors. You have to control the length and the diameter. And if you look at things the right way, it works this way. A 45 mil ITV and a 45 mil internal diameter tube, which one will flow more? The tube flows more because it doesn't have a throttle in the way, you know. So this just shows like it's one of those things. It's not the exact. It's not the difference is not because of the CFM. If it was only a CFM thing with the ITVs, it wouldn't gain all across the rev range. It wouldn't gain everywhere. But they do gain often everywhere. It's just because they are tuned. It's easier to tune ITVs. Like Rama sells a great kit of ITVs. RHD, most people know. I really like Rama because Rama is one of those guys. He puts his time into things. He does a lot of dyno testing. He really fully supports the products he sells. He has a great ITV kit. To me, in terms of price per quality, it's unbeatable. You cannot beat it. It works really well put together. He has put quite a lot of time and a lot of thought into them. It was proper tested. And generally, Rama, knows what is the best combination of ITB for a certain application. He has tested all the sizes, different runner lengths, different plenum types, and he kept on improving it. This is why I like his ITBs. He has tested them. He's not just, he made something that he knows it works out of principle because it's just better than the standard manifold, but didn't test. I know other companies that have done it and still sell it, and they are popular because ITB is always a gain anyway, and people think it's just because it's a good ITB, it's just because it's what it is. It's easy to do. Now, when it comes to the intake manifold, it is a lot trickier. It takes a lot more time and effort. And a manifold, you have the problem is, for example, when I make the manifolds nowadays, I do work with all this science that I just showed to you. I know, first off, I need to see like how much CFM I want to RHD ITBs. That's once ago. So on the sorry, I know I lost myself. On the manifold. So first I have to see like the CFM I need to have. Okay, so then I know the runner diameter I need to select. Then it comes the other side, which is the hardest part, which is the length of it. How long does it have to be? Now, the longer it is, it like there's areas that you have to see exactly what you want. So people think, oh, the longer it works better for low RPM. It depends what the diameter is. So you see, depends on the port speed you have. It has so many variants. It's really, it's one of those things is you need to have the experience to get it sort of right. And even with experience, you can still get it wrong. But of course, like I have done, I cannot count how many intake manifolds I've done and prototyped. And now I'm on the point that last manifold I've done, it done exactly what I wanted it to do. And I've done a video on Instagram showing the difference it was from the previous generation of manifold it had. And we had on that engine, we had a gain of average torque. It went from, where's my laptop? On the other one. Anyway, but it went from, I know in NMs, because it went from 207 NM average with the previous design to an average of 217 or 219. It was 12 NMs gain average in torque. And peak power, it made more by 5 bhp at wheels. You say it's not a lot, yeah, but because it has an average gain of NM of 17 NMs or 12 NMs, whatever it is, I cannot remember by heart. The car is a lot quicker. It is a lot faster. And I'll tell you something, the first version of the manifold has more CFM than the second one. So again, it's nothing to do with the CFM. It's all to do with the speed. And that's why you have to be realistic on choosing the size that you want to use. So this is why, like for this last manifold I've done, I didn't want to be doing the same as I've done previously, which is I have some different sizes and start playing with them. I just studied for longer the size I needed and put it together, and then it paid off. So the car made more power, more torque. It's a no-brainer, and then you look at it, it's a smaller diameter thing, but it made more power and torque. Now, the other part of the manifold that is extremely important, it's the way the plenum is filled and the plenum size as well. A few years ago, I used to pay a lot of attention to the plenum, not as much attention to the runner. Nowadays, I look at it on the complete opposite way. The plenum has a much smaller effect in performance than the runner does. So now I know like what's the ideal plenum size for whatever it needs to be. Now, the important thing also is to dimension the throttle body right. A good plenum is always good if you cannot run a very big throttle body because it just allows you to make slightly more power. because you have a bigger volume plenum, but the difference is very minimal. The thing is, when you have the throttle body size right, the plenum size right, you still have another problem, which is the feed of the plenum. So the directional way that the air enters the plenum, the route the air enters the plenum. Then also very important is the distance between the stacks to the walls of the plenum and the shape the plenum itself has on the edges. Everything affects massively the plenum performance. Now, just a second. For a stocky 36 M42 with a free flow 200, so a sports cat, give any benefit? I already have deleted the resonator. I have a free flow race muffler. I also want to raise the limit at 7.1 since power doesn't drop at 6.6, and I think I will benefit from the higher gear change at 4.5, 5K. The engine makes less HP than at 7K. Right. So I tested on M44, not on M42. The cat, no cat, the full standard exhaust system, a full different exhaust system, then another exhaust system, and another exhaust system. So I tested quite a few exhaust combinations before. On a standard M42, you gotta be very careful. M42s are quite hard in terms of fueling. The reason being, the standard ECU cannot read how much air it goes in. It sort of calculates it by the position of the flap on the airflow meter it has at the entry. The problem you have is, you take your cat out, the engine will use more fuel. Will need more fuel because it will pump more air through, it's better breathing, and the engine doesn't see that. It doesn't know it's actually at that RPM. It now has more volumetric efficiency. It cannot see it. The ECU doesn't see that. So the car is going to run lean. And when it runs lean, it's going to make a lot less torque, and then it makes less power as a consequence. I've seen that a year ago on a dyno, on a customer of mine brought in a car to dyno because I was abroad and I was doing a stage 4 tune on a car at the time, and it was different from what it is nowadays. And I needed to dyno a standard one on the dyno. This wasn't standard, so it was it was an M42. It had an exhaust and an intake, and the torque was non-existent of it. On the mid-range, it had just a bulge on it down because it was far on it. It was reaching to 15 of AF, extremely lean, and this is why it had that torque gap on the mid-range. But top end, it was right, and it actually made more power than a standard one does. It made like not a lot more, but it made the 143 bhp because the AFR at the top was right. It was not what they set it to be a standard. It was a little bit leaner, but leaner, that amount of being leaner was good. It's good for power production. So this is the way it works. In terms of revving it, as I said, I think on M42 you have to be careful. Whoever is mapping the car is extremely important. And I said to you, like, the performance is only as good as you allow an engine to be. Simple, plain and simple. So I got another question here. Hi Bruno, what is your opinion on lightweight flywheels? Also, are there any gains on with 4-into-1 headers? Right, a good question. Lightweight flywheel, the lighter the better. So, like, if someone asked me, I forgot, I gotta go through the questions I got asked on the previous video. Someone asked me, what is the ideal weight for a lightweight flywheel? And I said 0. And you get like 0, yeah. So you have to see, like, the more mass you have on the flywheel, the longer the engine is going to take to spin it. Like, if you had no flywheel, the engine will rev a lot faster and come down on the revs a lot faster. So the downside of having less mass on the engine is on the rotational part of the engine is the fact that it just goes up and down the revs a lot faster. So you have to be prepared for that. And like in some cases, some cars don't like it, especially cars that have like to control the idle mostly. It's where they really struggle when you come off the throttle, because the engine comes down a lot faster on the RPM. Like sometimes they struggle to catch up. Some cars get a really funny idle with a lightweight RPM, as I've seen, for example, on the 116s. The idle changes slightly with the lighter flywheel because the engine responds a lot more to small inputs. It's more responsive because there's less mass. So that's the way I see it. Then I saw people that said to me, "Oh, but with a different flywheel, the car lost torque." And I got only one question to ask. So the power the engine makes, in what way is it related with the flywheel? How is the flywheel going to affect the power production of an engine? It changes the delivery of the power, not the power production of it. It's very different. It's what happens inside the engine that tells you how much power it's going to make, not what is outside. It's not the flywheel that is going to change the power out of it. So, but generally, you look at things the right way. The more mass you add to the rotation assembly, the less the engine is going to want to rev. So the less you're going to have delivered. This is plain and simple. Is more mass, and when you have mass, is when you multiply mass times RPM, you increase the weight. So you have to look at things that way, not just think it needs to have a certain weight. The only reason why it needs to have weight is so it is still drivable, because with no flywheel, the car would not be really nice to drive. Like you wouldn't be able to drive it on the street. That it wouldn't be a streetable thing. So you need the inertia of the flywheel when you take your foot out of the clutch to still have some momentum to help the car pulling. Otherwise, it would have to be all done off throttle. Now, also, are there any gains into one header? Depends on the application. I usually do, to have a broader torque band, I use a 4x2x1 header. So a 3Y header, as they call it in the US. It gives you a broader torque band, so you are more on the torque. And to me, that is the most important thing. On more racy setups, I go 4x1, but I still use very long tubes. As you guys might have seen on my Instagram and my Facebook page, today I put together a 4x1 exhaust manifold, very long runners. It's easy to see on the pictures, but it's going on a 1.6 rally engine. The runners are long because it helps with the scavenging, and with more scavenging, it gains more torque. So if it's done right, the difference isn't huge if they both calculated to do the same. So this is the thing, but a 4x2x1 tends to be a more drivable manifold. Now, another one, Adrian. Not sure if the E9316i and 45E6 signal sold in UK, but have you considered doing an N44 1.6, 1.9 or 2 liter using the E9316i? How do you think the chassis dynamics will compare to the... you touched the point that I know one never asked before, and it's something that I looked for a very long time, and I couldn't find, even in Germany, an E9316i. As a matter of fact, I do have an E90 shell sitting at my garage, because I was thinking of putting the 116 engine onto the E90 shell. Now, the reason why I haven't done it is the E90 and the E87, they are extremely similar chassis. The biggest difference is the distance between front and rear axle. The 87 is shorter, is slightly lighter, is more nimble. So an E90, I think, with the power plant of the E87, the one I have at the moment, I don't think it would be a lot of fun. While the 116 is a lot of fun, just because it's shorter, it's lighter, it has all that thing. Now, when I make a 260, 270 bhp engine, then probably I'll put that on the E90. The E90, because it's heavier, it requires a more powerful engine to be just as fun and to show like its capabilities, because the chassis is just very, very good. So thank you for the question. Talking exhaust systems, would the leak between exhaust manifold and the rest of the pipe right before the wideband auto sensor on M42 would have any effect on power? Yeah, it would, big time. Especially when you're just driving around slowly. It would bring some fresh air to that area, because it will actually draw some of the air from the atmosphere into the pipe, and the oxygen sensor will have a wrong reading. It would show it's leaner, then it would start putting on it, and the car will start having odd behavior and wrong drivability. Now another question: people believe they lose low down torque because when they are clutching out starting drive, the engine lacks rotational inertia. Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. You just have to get used to it, because it's the inertia. It's not really power. It's just inertia isn't the same. You have to use the throttle a bit more. No problem. Folky said, thank you. You're welcome. I got another one. Mosin Dulu. I hope I'm saying your name right. I don't want to insult anyone. Hi Bruno, I got an M42 in my 36 saloon. It's a rebuilt engine. Oh, it's gone. Oh no, it's gone. It's gone now. Now, another one. So, could you talk about the effect of humidity in power, and if there's a case for water injection in an engines? Well, that's a very good point to talk about. Two very good points. Humidity, it's not really a good thing to have in the atmosphere. So I said this on another video. If the air is really humid, the car is going to make less power. You want the atmosphere to be dry and the right temperature. So you want low temperature and low humidity for it to make decent power. When you put humidity on it, it means you have water on the combustion chamber, which is not ideal. In terms of water injection, it is good, but it has to be on a boosted engine. It's water is important, but it has to be really atomized properly in order for it to be efficient. So to cool down, instead of just filling the cylinders with water, it has to be really, really cleverly used. So the main effect is when you have quite a very high temperature on the intake, the water will bring the temperature right down, and it's with a colder charge you make more power. But as I said again, it has to be done properly. It's not just put water on it, put a bottle and just put a bottle on the intake. Yeah, it works well, cools down the charge. No, it's not like that. There's a lot more to it. So, but as I said, on a boosted car, especially with Eaton type superchargers, it really helps having water to cool down the intake. Really helps. On NA, which is what I do mostly, is NA. We don't want things like that in it. It takes power away, because it's water inside the combustion chamber. There's nothing. So, got SR. Can you talk about the plan for the upcoming Cayman turbo build? Ooh, not yet. I'll do a video on that one. The car arrived yesterday to the workshop. Monday, the owner is dropping the engine and the components for me to start working on it, but I'm only starting to work on it, I believe, towards the end of February, and I will keep you guys updated on it. But I got other exciting builds to do with the turbo E34 M5. At the moment we are loaded with work, just on a very different point. I am looking for someone to work, but has to be someone really keen and willing to learn and passionate about it, and really good on maths. I appreciate that. If you guys know anyone that is looking for a job to work on this, to work with me, which is not the easiest thing, please let them get in touch with me, and we can arrange a meeting, and hopefully we get some more, because we really need to grow the team, because we have quite a lot of demand at the moment, and by myself it's not quite possible. Now, hi Bruno, I've got an M42 in my 36 saloon drift car. I've rebuilt the engine, but want to know your opinion on what route to go down for mods like boost, cams, headwork, etc. There's too many possible answers for this question. It firstly depends like what is your budget, and secondly, what is your target. Now, to make a reliable turbo build, you need to spend some money on it. You can make it reliable without spending a lot of money, but you cannot. There's certain things you cannot cheap out, and you have to be really cautious on the way things are tuned. This is the most important thing, is to tune it right so it will work. A few years ago, I tuned the 318IS turbos, stock internals, and we managed to squeeze 290 bhp out of it. Then we had a problem, just the head gasket failed, but the pistons were still fine. Everything was still perfect. The head gasket failed. And the reason why it failed was because the wastegate decided to stop working. So the car was just having spikes of boost, and that ended up killing the head gasket. Then from then, it was what led us to working together with the customer, with the owner of the car, to make the car he has now, which is that 318IS that is making on low boost 410 bhp. So generally it depends like how much you want to put into it, what your main power target is. But as I say, my advice to you is, in terms of like ECU and whoever tunes the ECU, don't try to save money on it. Make like injectors as well. Make sure you get the right bits that to work right, because that will be very important for the reliability of the engine, how long it lasts and everything. Now, Tickens one. Okay, since we already sidetracked Bruno with a question, Bruno, what do you think about my drilled out piston oil squirters? As I said, bring it to the thing. It will be something to talk about. Now, it's not a good idea. The reason for it is the oil squirters, they are made to work with the good of two things, you know. So you have an oil pump that has it can pump a certain volume of oil, and with that volume, it will make a certain pressure. It needs a certain RPM to do that. Now, it's made to work to lubricate the full engine, right? And the oil squirters are on the primary oil line that comes off the pump into the engine. On the first run, it goes down to the main bearings. From there, through the crank flows to the big end bearings. But on the same line, you have the oil squirters. If you drilled bigger holes in it, it wouldn't be ideal, because you would start losing oil pressure. And it's more important for you to have a higher oil pressure than worrying about cooling the pistons a bit more. If you are worried about that, the best thing you can do, your best bet, is to add more cooling to the oil, so it cools down. Put an oil cooler on it, a decent size oil cooler on it, or ceramic coat the pistons. Like all my builds I've done recently have ceramic coated pistons, and generally it makes a difference. It's not going to be like, wow, now it's 50 degrees lower. No, it's not. It's not going to be like that, but it makes a difference. It has an impact on it. It stops the piston from heating up the block, and it just, the oil itself, you know, it makes a world of a difference. It definitely worth doing. So this is my advice: ceramic coat the pistons to don't have as much oil temperature built on the, like, because the squirters are cooling down the piston and stuff, and or add oil cooler. Oil cooler will cool down the oil, and then this way you don't lose your oil pressure, which is very vital to your engine. You want to have a very good film of oil at all times, especially on the bearings. Now, previous said you didn't like Caymans. Why? That generation, I don't like the interior of them. That's what I said. No, the interior is not for me. It looks too much like an Audi, and I don't like that. You know, it might be me, but I prefer the look of a 986 inside than a Cayman or a 987 Boxster. It's not really for me the interior of the car. I like dynamically the way the car is and what it can do, but the Cayman, I much rather have the version just after the first version of the Cayman. To me, it's the car to have. No, David, your intake looks great. Is there any way of using it with the stock airbox to avoid much attention? Asking for a friend. Yeah, I know that. So you can use an airbox on it. You just have to modify all you have to do is where the throttle body comes off, you just have to route a pipe to connect into the original airbox. As simple as that. So it's not rocket science. You just, on the standard manifold. So let's say this is the throttle body here. This is the airbox. It has a pipe that comes from here to here, right? So our one, the throttle body actually comes from the front, or we can have a side feed. So from the front, the airbox is here. All it has to do is like this. Problem sorted. It's into an airbox. It's all routing. So that's it. And that it's the side one, which like manifold is here, and it feeds from the side. As you guys have seen that one as well. It's even easier because throttle bar is here and it just goes straight into the airbox. That's it. Simple. It all depends if it's for an E36 and E30. E30 side feed, E36 front feed. So this is the difference on those intakes. It's E30 and E36. Side feed, I also done side feed for some E36s, but I prefer to have the front feed on E36. Folk, can you get fogged intake so it sucks air at fog light? Yes, yeah, you can. I have done that. I had that on my 116 for quite a while, and I took it off. Because when there was a lot of rain, I ruined 2 air filters in a week. So I took it off and I moved it to a different location where it wasn't as low and couldn't suck any water in. Still is on a good place, and I dynoed it to have the right length I wanted on the tube to make sure I wasn't losing a lot, because as I checked before, of course it depends on the combination there is on the engine. Okay, don't forget that. A long pipe tends to perform better in terms of torque and all that nonsense. No, those were exactly my concerns, and oil cooler and piston coating were my thoughts also. Obrigado. Nada, sempre às ordens. What is your opinion on the M42 Lauren turbo kits? Have you heard of them? Also asking for a friend. Yeah, you have a friend that is very interested on this stuff. I'm not going to talk about a product I haven't seen tested. This is the thing. Because I do a lot of testing on what I do, and I know it's the only right way of seeing what is good and what's not. I don't tend to talk about a product that I haven't seen any testing done on. That's the thing. A turbo kit is a turbo kit. But longevity, I think it should be key, and performance also, of course, it's a point. It's a turbo kit, so you want to get the best performance out of it. I haven't seen the price. I've heard of it briefly before, but I'm not really entirely sure how they work and what they do, and how well they are to fit, how good of a fitment they have. So it's not something I can talk about. Now, how many HP can the stock injector scope on the M44? At what stage are they replaced? This is a good question. It depends how much fuel pressure you have on them. They usually run out of oomph over 165 bhp at the standard 3 bar. 3.5 bar, 170 something bhp. At 4 bar, they can do 180 bhp, and then I wouldn't recommend going any higher than 4 bar on them, because then they start not liking it. So the chances of getting a stuck inject, especially at the age they are now, it becomes higher. What was your feeling driving the N45 V20 VDS with new manifold? was fantastic. That car before when it had the V1 intake manifold on it, it felt a bit flat compared to my one. But with a new intake, they feel extremely similar. It's just the only difference you feel is the actual difference in the weight of the car, and the wheels, I think, play a big role on it, because my one is on 16s, the other one is on the 18s. But really, really nice to drive. It is much nicer to drive. It's a lot more torque everywhere. You can really feel the difference you see on the dyno. You see it on the road. And like as I said yesterday on the Instagram video, at 4,000 RPM with a new manifold, the car has 14 bhp more at the wheels. It is a massive number to have of difference. So that's the thing. Asking now for myself. As you go standalone, can you delete the MAF at all? Or is there a need for a yacht sensor? Intake air temperature, you can take the MAF out and you just use the two wires and buy just a temperature sensor and just wire them on with a plug. This is the way I've done on my 116. So get a proper plug for the sensor you use and put a sensor on it. It's good to have intake air temperature, so you can monitor what's the temperature of the air that is going inside the engine. You know, it's good to see. Also gives you a good indication if your air filter is in the right place or not. So this is the thing about it. So sorry guys, just was seeing just a quick message from a good friend of mine. So yeah, that's it. Now, should I go back to intake or ITBs, or you guys don't want me to hear talk about it? So I was going to mention the pros and cons out of both, but then you guys asked all the questions and there was no more ITB intake manifold thing. Should I go for it? I'm going to wait a few seconds. If no one answers, then I'll end the video here. Joking. Yes. Okay, let's go. Yes, please. Okay, this video is going to be long. It's already over an hour now. Now, again, let's not forget I'm not an ITB hater. Okay, many people think I am. I am not. What I hate is the misconception about ITBs, because people think ITBs can do something magic that nothing else can. The magic is not on the ITBs; it's on the science of the air that enters the engine. So delete all this. So for starters, I'm going to leave this here, but I'm going to write it differently. If you guys have M42s, M44s, it has kits for other engines. The ITB I would personally recommend, it's RHD ITBs. I mentioned the reason why is generally because he really tests his products and I really like him. He's a really spot on guy, you know, really nice. Now, let's go. So earlier on, I explained why, like what would flow more and stuff. So you guys know it's nothing to do with flow. But now let's go to the dynamic characteristic of things. ITB, for example, people say, yeah, but M3s have ITBs and loads of performance cars have ITBs, right? But most of proper performance cars and hypercars don't have ITBs. And that's things that people don't talk about. Now, why does BMW use this ITB on the S50s, S54, S62s, S14s? Why? What is the reason behind it? It comes down to a combination of factors. There's one thing an ITB will always have over the intake manifold, which is when they are balanced right, because this is one of the things you have. One of the downsides of ITB, downside is you have to balance them. So it's not a big deal. You don't have to balance them every day. So balance required. Fitting, it might be more fiddly. fitting. An intake is going to be simpler to put on. Now, upside. When you have a more aggressive cam, when you increase the overlap, you have some cylinder pressure loss. And then you have one thing that really helps on the ITV. There's low port speed at the idle, and therefore atomization for the fuel is harder. And if you have a very aggressive cam, that makes it even worse. So on the runner of the manifold, it's going to be very hard to balance all of the cylinders equally, because it's not quite running at the ideal no overlap thing. On ITVs, you have a throttle just at the entry of the port that controls the amount of air that gets in. So when you have that wave, when the valve shuts, goes back, and then when the valve opens again, the turbulence that comes from just heating and going back when injector is there, it helps, because the throttle is there, it helps actually getting it to work better. So the best example I've had two engines, very similar, ported heads, exactly the same cam. One was on ITVs, the other one was my intake manifold. One thing I've noticed instantly, the idle on the car on ITVs was far smoother. And this is a reason for it. On ITV, the idle is always going to be smoother with a more aggressive cam. There's no way you can make an idle as smooth with an intake manifold unless you have a very expensive ECU that can control cylinders individually. And you're talking about like Bosch Motorsport ECUs, and it's not like we cannot spend 20 grand on just an ECU alone. That's the thing. That's not for everyone. So this is one of the pros. Going to start idle. This, remember, they have to be balanced right. It's key for them to be proper adjusted. Other thing that is really good on ITVs is the throttle response. You can make a plenum, a manifold, intake manifold, really good as well, but it's like, this is very hard to quantify because it depends in quite a lot of factors on the intake manifold. The throttle response on the ITV is usually going to be quicker. So it's always going to be that boom, sharper, because what it does, it's like, this is more evident when you have more power on an engine that revs really high. It's when it really starts showing, but it's not that big. If everything is dimensioned right on the manifold, it's not going to show that much. So throttle response, it's another thing. Okay. Other one, engine braking. Now, this is logic. So on the ITVs where the throttle is located, right before the port. So your engine braking, front movement camera of the throttle, it's there. On a manifold, it's not going to be the same. It's more progressive on the engine braking. Why? Because between the throttle body and the valve itself, it's quite a distance, and there's a volume that has to be emptied before it actually starts braking. So, of course, where is the impact going to be? What's going to impact this? Again, it's a combination of things. There's quite a lot of variance. So the plenum size, it's going to determine it, like how quickly you're going to have engine braking, or if you're not going to have as much engine braking. If you have a plenum that is too big, you're going to take the foot off the throttle and the engine goes like, it's not, it's not good. And this is like, this is very important for you when designing a manifold, like to calculate like the ideal plenum size. There is a ratio that it works quite well is the ideal plenum size, not ideal, let's call like, I will call it minimum plenum size is 1.5 liters, the 1.5 times the size of the engine in liters. So, you know, it's just if the engine is a 2 liter, you want the plenum to be at least 3 liters. This is a minimum. This to me, it's a minimum value for it, because I think if it's smaller, then it doesn't work well at all. And I've seen cases where people have a very big throttle body on a very small plenum, and then the car is horrendous to drive because your throttle control, it's almost non-existent. Because when you have a big throttle body and a small engine, what happens is it's hard for you to control throttle because, like, let's say at 20% throttle, it's almost giving as much air as the engine needs to make almost the, let's say, the max power, or like to make 60% of power. But then you only gave 20% of throttle, but you're already giving it enough air to make 60% of power. And this is when a throttle body is too big for the application. And this is another area that most people have misconceptions about a throttle body size. They think it has to be big to make more power. It doesn't. It has to be the right size to make the right amount of power. So this is the other thing. It's again, has to do with throttle response, but engine braking. So engine braking, they are better on these things. So there's a few little more things that can also be slightly better, but it's things that you would not notice at all. This is the main thing about them. You got smoother idle, throttle response, engine braking. Downside is balance required, fitting. The other upside on it is easier to find right combination. Okay, but this is more for people like me that like to test things. It's not so much for the final consumer. But this is still an upside. Now, you guys seen the ITBs, like the upsides and downsides. We go now to the manifold. So the manifold is going to be the opposite of this, most likely. You know, the thing is, on the manifold, for example, someone buys one of my intakes, instruction manual, take your old one off and put the new one in. Done. There's no balancing, nothing. You got one throttle, it's one cable, connect, put it wherever you want. There's another downside on ITVs is, which can be, it's a downside and an upside. So downside is space or plenum in some cases, which it's also can be an upside in packing because they can use less space than an intake manifold. They can, doesn't mean they will. It's two different things. So this is other thing. So when I sell like an intake manifold, I sell them. I don't always fit them myself. I send them to the States. I don't fit them in the States. There's a few cars like in Europe with them. In UK, there's quite a few with them as well. And when other people fit them, I just tell them a few things they have to understand. It's like, but this applies for both. It's like, to make the most out of it, you really need to have a standalone ECU. I have had on my car, I run my manifold on the stock ECU for quite a long time, for 3 years. But when I put the standalone on it, it really changed the dynamic of the car completely, because then the car was tuned properly for that intake manifold. And if you ask, was it much power difference from going from the standalone from the stock ECU to the standalone? No, in terms of peak numbers, there was very little, to be honest. But it's not again, peak numbers, or like what the dyno says to you, it doesn't translate into the way the car drives. And the drivability was far superior on the standalone because on the areas where the standard ECU doesn't have the resolution to see what car is doing, it just drove a lot nicer. So that's the thing. It worked better. It's just the best. So for both, we will want standalone ECU. Intake manifold, the thing where I like it is the fact that it can make as much power as an ITV. If you calculate things right, as I explained to you earlier on the video, then, but you have to understand, like, if you have very aggressive cams, your idle is going to be the way I like it, lumpy. It's going to be ta 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 ta. It's not going to be a straight idle. I love an idle like that. I think every race car should have it. Throttle response. So between my intake manifold and the throttle bodies I tested on the M42s, M44 that I've done, I couldn't take them apart, because I think that's only because I did spend a lot of time on my intake, making sure it had the right throttle body size to fill the plenum nicely. And again, so the throttle body size I use on my intakes, they are 70 mil. So by having 70 mil throttle body, it's an overkill. It's too big for what the engine needs. It's not too big, it's just a little bit bigger than what it needs. But it just gives you plenty of room. If you want to have more power, you can still have more power with it. It doesn't limit you in terms of power. And like I also done a CFM testing on my manifold to see how much power it could produce with the manifold. And it's close to 300 CFM. It was, from memory, I think it was 297 CFM. Okay, if you guys understand, that's enough to do 300 plus bhp. Okay, plain and simple. Will you ever make it with my intake? Not sure, I never tried it. The only thing I know is on the white car that I had, it made 230 bhp, and I still have no change in density from the plenum of the manifold to the atmospheric at the time when it was tested. Because the good thing about the standalone, it measures also the pressure, and you can compare the plenum pressure with the pressure with the atmosphere. So this is the other good thing about it. Now, in terms of the other thing it has is, if you don't have a plenum on the ITVs, which most people like to run them with seeing the stacks, and I can see why. You open the bonnet and you see the stacks on ITVs, it just looks gorgeous. It generally does. I'm not being sarcastic, I really like it. And the problem is, all the heat you're going to have in there, it's not going to be good. It's going to hurt performance massively. It changes the way the car performs really, really badly. I calculated, this was like 2 years ago when I first started working on the 116, and when I had it on the dyno, when I've done the cold air for it. And I think I remember, just by gaining 20 degrees on the intake, I think the car dropped like 7 bhp, which is a lot. It hurts performance quite a bit. And we're talking 7 bhp on an engine that didn't make nowhere near 200 bhp at the time. So it's massive. The difference is very big. So it's one thing you have to take into consideration is make sure there's a decent airbox on it. And then I've seen someone testing other thing on ITVs that I found extremely interesting is airbox fit. And this happens the same on the plenums as well. So when I do the feed on the intake, I have to take special care the way it's done inside, because the wrong size feeding it's going to spoil completely all the lovely work it can do after. So if you have an airbox on it, make sure it's flowing as much as it's not only flow, it's done the right way, so there's not a lot of turbulence on it. The ones from Brahma, I know they are. I've seen them in person, and it's a really, really nice bit of kit. Also, they redesigned them, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago. It has an even better design than before. So that's the thing. With the intake manifold, is generally drop it in, bolt your position sensors with TPS onto it, the brake booster on it, just have then a cold air pipe feeding it. You can put the pipe to anywhere you like. It's very versatile. That is the thing, that's where to me, it gains over the ITVs. And the reason why I haven't used ITVs on my builds is because if I can make a manifold that can perform as well as an ITV, why am I going to be putting an ITV when the simplicity of the manifold just beats it? It's as simple as that. There's no maintenance on an intake manifold. You just put it on and run it. That's it. ITVs, like as much as they can be built with quality, like Rama does his ones, you still have to check them. I would say I would recommend people to check them depending how long they drive it for and stuff. But every year, at least have them rebalanced, make sure everything is within what it should be. But that's it, It just the thing is, the reason why I pushed so much on the intake manifolds is not because I don't like ITVs. It's because a manifold can make as much power as an ITV if it's done right. The problem you have is there's very little people putting the time into designing an intake manifold and testing it to make sure it does the right numbers. So as some of you might have seen, and I've done a video about this on Instagram at the time, I compared again like ITVs with my intake manifold, and there was no difference on the power. It was literally no difference on the power production. They behaved exactly the same way. There was no, oh, this makes more here, this makes more. No, they actually didn't even went up and down. They had a small area that was slightly different, but it's like 1 foot-pound or something. It's not even noticeable, doesn't even worth talking about. So this is the thing. Again, so it's all a matter of whatever you prefer to put on. If you want something that is practical and simple, go for an intake manifold. If you want to look flashy, put ITVs on it. Now, don't come and tell me like the ITVs are going to make more power, because as I said to you, it's not the way it works, And then if you do like what most people do, which is putting ITVs far bigger than what they need to be, you're actually you're going to make a lot less power. But this can also happen on a manifold when it's wrong dimensioned, as it happened on the previous one that I've done. So the thing is, the more I do study about the engine science and what an engine needs to make the power and the torque, the more I realize there are so many variants that when someone asks me, so what's the best combination to use? The answer is, it depends on what you want to achieve. So it comes down to that. If you want to achieve big, you have to make everything big, and you got to be prepared to spend a lot of money. There's no magic part that you're going to bolt on and give you 100% performance gain. That doesn't exist. And the other thing is an engine, the performance is going to be, or an engine is going to perform as well as the tuner allows it to. That's the other thing, you see. So I have a good example. There's someone abroad. They bought a set of cams, the ones we use on our on all of our stage 3s and stage 4s. And everyone that had our cams, they felt the difference. You guys have seen the results on my dyno. It's always huge, the difference. You fit them on and they had no gain. It's all the car felt flat and all this, that, the other. So today I was speaking to him for quite a while, and then he told me there's no one that knows how to time them. Also, the other thing he has dimple done on his cylinder head, and his engine is making no torque. And now, as I spoke about this area before, but I will talk about it in more detail on a future video, is if you use a cam that doesn't have a lot of lift, dimple is only going to make it worse. Port speed is not going to be there. Like the CFM is not there. So you're only going to make the car worse. The car will perform better with a standard head than with one that has dimple. So you have to be careful when you put the cylinder head on. Again, it's all to do with the air science. And as I said, and I keep saying, an engine is an air pump. The way the air enters the engine, the speed the air enters the engine are going to be extremely important to the power delivery of the engine. If you guys have too much airspeed, or there isn't too much airspeed, if you guys have too little airspeed, sorry, and it's just not entering the engine the right way, it has too much turbulence entering the cylinder, it's not really going to be ideal. You want some turbulence, which is called swirl, but that's induced usually by the shape of the cylinder head, the way the port is directed. So You know, it just everything has to be done within a reason, and going big is not always better. So, and this is the I think the end of the subject today. We are now at close to 1 hour and a half of video, which is a lot. It's more than what I planned, but it's fine. I don't mind it. It has been fun doing this one. So, M42 stage 2 heads. With it's not stage 2 now. They are V2 heads. With your intake, how much BHP, any other modification either recommended? On M42, before anything being done to it, I would recommend to convert them to standalone. M42 engine management is really bad. It's really bad, especially when you want to get performance out of them. They don't really respond well to it. So my first advice to you would be just to get a standalone ECU. And instead of porting the head, before you port the head, there's more gain to have if you put the cam on. So if you put standalone ECU, cam, and intake manifold, which this is what our stage 4 is, there's plenty of power. Last one I've done, M42 with that, we managed to squeeze 177 bhp out of it, which is very decent. What is your favorite front-wheel drive car? I think you asked that before. It depends on the day of the week. Now, for front-wheel drive cars, I've driven a lot of cars. At the moment, like off the top of my head is not there. It's in another area, so I cannot really tell. I could tell like it's the one of the. It depends if it is to drive fast or to go to the track. So fast road or track use. So that's the thing. You have to categorize them. Go standalone. It's incredible games. Yes. David, this gentleman that is speaking here, I have remotely tuned this car. So the past Monday, I was doing his car overall with TeamViewer, and well, you guys can you can tell what he's saying now. So M44, should I first go for cams, intake, or headwork? Cams. Thing is, you guys have to understand, like the standard cams don't bring the power potential of the head in no way, shape, or form. So it's like the cams, like the ones we usually put. The beautiful thing about them is they have no loss in any area of the torque band. They only add, which is extremely hard. This is all thanks to Dimitris at Boobies. A crazy amount of knowledge this man has in towards cams. It taught me a lot, really a lot. You guys have no idea how much he taught me about cams. I had so many misconceptions that now I don't have, and now I can really start. I can really program things for my engines better with the right cam when I speak with him. It's just completely different, you know. So that is it. So that's my advice. Yeah, that's it. It's a surprise, isn't it? So as I said, you know, cams will expose more the cylinder head, the standard cylinder head on the M44. They aren't bad at all. You know, they have good CFM. If you have the right cams, you can make good power. The only reason why I tend to do cylinder head work is so I don't overcam the engine, so they make more power without losing drivability. But because with these cams, they still maintain great drivability. This is the best of both. So I give it more CFM. It has more cam. It works even better. But our cams on the standard head, they work really well. I generally, it's go and see the results we have achieved, like on our Instagram. It's always good. There's not even one that was bad. And there's a few people that don't know if they are watching or not, that have them fitted, and they know the difference it made on the car. It's really good. And one of the cars that has our cam, the equivalent to our V2 cylinder head, standard intake manifold, but proper worked out, fully worked inside, ported, everything done nicely inside it. That car is making 178 bhp, still is on the standard intake manifold. Most people think it's not possible. That car is doing it. And it's making 153 foot-pounds of torque, which is mega for an M44. It's really good. What is your advice on exchanging the cams? Easy to do it yourself, or better to drive it to a mechanic just to see how much it has on the bill? It's tricky, that one, because you might end up with the same problem the other gentleman I spoke to on a video call today has. It is no one is actually capable of guiding him how to do it right, or no mechanic can do it right. So if you have cams installed, make sure they're installed by someone that knows what he's doing. Otherwise, you end up with a car that has less performance than before. This is my way of looking at it. If you are capable of fitting the cams, but you're unsure on timing them, if you're buying the cams from us at a very small fee, I will charge you like half an hour of my time, and I will guide you through the time I spend, I will guide you through the fitting on the cams on a live call. That is it. It's plain and simple. So you can do it yourself, still save some money. You do the most of the things. You follow me. If we spend an hour, I'll charge you for an hour of my time so I'm guiding you through the work. If I want to buy your cams, do I need to send you my old ones? Yes, because they are regrinds. So you need to send your old ones. How much are your cams? Well, it's in GBP, so in pounds. So because I'm in UK, they are 450. Expect me in the future. Oh well, I hope so. So this is it, guys. So guys, it's now hour and a half of video. I'm going to end this one. It has been brilliant, guys. Get more people involved. Let's get more questions. I'm going to bring more interesting subjects. If there's a subject that you would like me to discuss in the future, that you find it's interesting for me to start talking openly about it, just bring it on to the thing. The reason why I chose to speak about ITBs and intake manifolds today is because I have seen quite a few things recently around this area, and someone today was talking to me about intake manifold being restrictive for his Clio, and he's thinking about ITBs, this, that, the other. And I chose to do this video so we can understand better, like it's limitation might not really be on the intake manifold or the way it's done. Like the other Clio I've done, it was still on the standard intake manifold and made over 200 bhp, and it was just a 172 with my cylinder head on it. This is the thing, is like if it's tuned right, it should work really well. Intake tune, not the tune on the ECU. It's the thing. So guys, thank you very much. As I said, leave the comments for the future questions that you might want to ask. If there's a subject you guys would like me to cover, just please write on the comment section, and get people to share this video. If you think it's nice, share it on your page. The thing is, the more people we add on the viewers, the better it is. We had quite a good average of views today. It's like it has tripled since the first time I started. Still not a lot of people. We are 11 at the moment, but we are all good. We are all talking with each other, which is fantastic. And as I said, the reason why I'm doing this video is so we can all learn together. If you have questions, just drop them in the comments, drop me a message, and I will answer your questions on the videos. I think it's easier so everyone learns at the same time. And then if someone asks something in regards to a certain question, you can always forward the question to this video, and this person will have to search for it. Of course, hour and a half of video is quite a long time to search, but I think there's so much to learn on the old video. It's worth watching the full video. So that is it. So guys, again, thank you for the following, especially for the people that are not in UK, that are abroad. Your support is tremendous. I really love having people like you supporting me. In Australia, I have at least 5 people from Australia watching the video at the moment. Guys, I really appreciate you being up so early just to see my videos. It's crazy, it's something so small, but it has so much meaning to me, Again, thank you very much. Have a very good weekend, guys. Enjoy the weekend. Any questions, down low on the comment section, or hit me on my messages on the WhatsApp or our Facebook. Stay safe, guys. Have a nice one.